March 22, 2011, somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, a luxury cruise ship moves silently through international waters, carrying over 2,000 passengers wrapped in a multi-billion-dollar promise of magic and safety. But behind the marketing lies a chilling legal vacuum. Once you hit the open sea, the law you trust completely shifts, and jurisdiction becomes a complete farce. This isn't a tragedy on land with local detectives and scheduled press conferences. This is a disappearance in international waters where American law stops, where British law stops, and where justice can be washed away before the ship even docks. The ship was called the Disney Wonder. 15 decks, 2,400 passengers, multiple restaurants, shows, pools, and a dedicated crew of nearly 900 people. Yet, in the early hours of March 22, 2011, one of those crew members simply vanished. Her name was Rebecca Coriam. She was 24 years old, from Chester, England, and worked on the ship as a youth counsellor, the very person responsible for keeping children safe on board. Ironically, the last person to ever see her was a camera. At approximately 5:45 in the morning, a security camera inside a crew corridor captured Rebecca on a ship's internal phone. She was wearing a pair of men's shorts that didn't belong to her, later traced to a male crew member, and she was visibly distressed. Her body language was stiff and agitated, her face deeply upset. Whatever was being said on the other end of that call, it was not good news. That silent recording remains the last confirmed sighting of Rebecca Coriam. She never made it to her shift. Hours passed before anyone raised an alarm. Eventually, her personal identity lanyard, the one crew members are strictly required to wear at all times, was found on the outer deck, near the edge, rather than below in her cabin. This is where the story stops being a tragedy and starts being something else entirely. The Disney Wonder was not sailing under an American or British flag, it was registered in the Bahamas. This means the moment something happens on that vessel in international waters, the investigation doesn't go to the FBI or Scotland Yard. It goes to the Bahamas Maritime Authority, a small island nation with no dedicated cruise ship homicide unit, no forensic dive team, and no cold case division. The Bahamian police launched an investigation that ultimately went nowhere. No charges were filed and no cause of death was ever established because there was no body. Rebecca Coriam was gone, but here is the detail that stops everyone cold. By the time investigators were able to properly examine the area where Rebecca's lanyard was found, the deck had already been cleaned and washed down. Disney claimed it was standard ship maintenance and routine procedure. But the timing of that cleaning, immediately after a crew member went missing, was something Rebecca's parents never forgot. Her father, Mike Coriam, stated publicly that he believed Disney cleaned the scene before investigators could even access it. Disney denied any wrongdoing, released a statement expressing their condolences, and moved on. Rebecca's parents, however, did not. For years, Mike and Ann Coriam pushed for the truth. They contacted Disney directly, engaged lawyers, lobbied the Foreign Office in London, and gave countless interviews. They even stood outside the Disney headquarters in Burbank, California, holding photographs of their daughter, demanding answers. Disney's response remained entirely consistent, corporate, careful, and ultimately empty. Here is something Disney does not advertise. Like every major cruise line, they have an internal incident response team whose job is not to investigate what happened, but to manage what happens next to the brand. When something goes wrong on a cruise, a death, an assault, a disappearance, the company's first call is not to law enforcement. The priority is communications containment, managing who talks to the press, what statement goes out, and exactly how it is worded. This is not speculation. In 2010, just 1 year before Rebecca disappeared, the United States Congress passed the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, known as the CVSSA. It was passed because cruise lines had spent decades handling crimes on their ships with absolutely no legal obligation to report them to American authorities, even when the victims were American citizens or the ships departed from American ports. The act finally required cruise lines to report crimes to the FBI, install security cameras, and preserve evidence. It was a significant piece of legislation, and Disney's legal team understood exactly what it meant and exactly where its limits lay. The CVSSA covers voyages departing from American ports with American citizens. Rebecca Coriam was British, so the investigation still fell squarely on the Bahamas. In the years since, cruise lines have been repeatedly accused of dragging their feet on evidence preservation, losing CCTV footage, failing to keep witnesses on board, and allowing ships to continue sailing with intact crime scenes before any meaningful investigation can begin. A ship in motion cannot be easily stopped by a small island police force, and pulling a multi-million-dollar vessel out of service costs the company massive amounts of money. The moment that ship docks at the next port, witnesses disembark, evidence degrades, and the news cycle moves on. Disney is exceptionally good at moving on. Their parks generated over $90 billion in revenue last year, and their brand is built on a single promise: safety, happy families, and magic. But the thing about magic is that it only works if you never look behind the curtain. Rebecca Coriam is not an isolated name. She is the most famous, but she is far from alone. In 2004, Marion Carver disappeared from a Holland-America cruise ship in Alaska. Her clothes, camera, passport, and medication were found neatly folded and left behind in her cabin. The cruise line failed to report her missing for days, her body was never found, and the case remains completely unsolved. In 2005, 26-year-old American George Smith IV disappeared from a Royal Caribbean ship in the Mediterranean while honeymooning with his new wife. When investigators finally boarded, they found a significant amount of blood on a lifeboat canopy directly below Smith's cabin window. Yet, the ship had continued sailing for hours before the alarm was raised. By the time the FBI examined the scene, the canopy had been partially cleaned, and crucial witnesses had already disembarked across multiple countries. No one was ever charged. Since 1995, the International Cruise Victims Association estimates that over 300 people have gone overboard or disappeared from cruise ships worldwide. That is 10 people per year, nearly one every single month. In the vast majority of those cases, no one was ever convicted and many were never even properly investigated. International waters are not a grey area, they are a black hole. The moment a ship clears territorial waters, the law of the flag state applies. If the ship is registered in the Bahamas, Panama, or Liberia, those are the laws that govern it. These are not nations with the resources or infrastructure to investigate a suspicious death on a moving vessel carrying thousands of passengers, and the cruise lines know it. They chose those flags deliberately, not for the weather, but for the legal protection. Rebecca Coriam's case was officially closed with no conclusion, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. There was no explanation for the men's shorts she was wearing, no explanation for the distressed phone call, and no explanation for the convenient timing of that deck cleaning. Her parents have spent over a decade fighting for answers, paying for private investigators, and standing outside Disney's gates. But Disney, one of the most powerful corporations on the planet with an army of lawyers and a PR machine that makes governments look amateur, simply waited them out. There are Disney cruises departing today. There are thousands of people boarding ships right now, happy, excited, and wearing Mickey Mouse ears, stepping directly into a legal jurisdiction designed to make accountability disappear. And somewhere at the bottom of an ocean, or nowhere at all, is a 24-year-old from Chester, England, who just wanted to work with children, who made one final phone call, walked out onto a deck, and was never seen again.